the summer of 1910, a firestorm of unimaginable ferocity swept across the American West. It was called the Big Burn. It consumed 3 million acres of pristine forest in 2 days. Whole towns were incinerated. But the highest price was paid by the men in the remote logging camps who were caught in the path of a roaring wall of flame. In the Whispering Pines sector, the entire crew of the North Fork Logging Company, led by their formidable foreman, Jedediah Croft, was declared missing. When the smoke finally cleared, there was nothing left. No camp, no equipment, no bodies. They had simply been erased. History remembers the fire, but the forest remembers the men. And it is said that in the deepest parts of that wood, a crew of soot-stained men still works the night shift, their spectral axes echoing in the dark, still trying to finish one last job for a foreman who refuses to let a little thing like death get in the way of a quota. Ben has always been the history nerd. I'm the one who finds the perfect campsite. We ignored the old ranger's warning, of course. The Whispering Pines was the most beautiful, untouched part of the forest we'd ever seen. We found a small clearing surrounded by ancient, towering pines, the ground soft with a century of fallen needles. It felt sacred, peaceful. As we set up the tent, the silence of the deep woods settled around us. It wasn't an empty silence. It was a heavy, watchful one, the kind that makes you feel like you're in a vast, green cathedral. We got the fire going. The crackle and pop a welcome human sound against the immense quiet. We felt like the only 2 people on Earth. We were trespassing, of course. We crossed into a place that was supposed to be forgotten, but the beauty was intoxicating. We were arrogant. We thought the woods had welcomed us. It was Ben who found it. He was gathering firewood near the base of a huge, lightning-scarred pine when he tripped on something. It was a piece of metal sticking out of the soft earth. My first thought was old rebar, a piece of junk. But as we dug it out, we realized what it was. A massive 2-man crosscut saw blade over 5 feet long. It was rusted solid, the wooden handles long since rotted away, but the teeth were still wicked sharp. A misery whip, Ben whispered, his eyes wide with historical glee. This is from the old logging camp. This is over 100 years old. We dragged it back to our campsite like a trophy. We propped it up against a log by the fire, the metal gleaming in the firelight. It was an amazing piece of history, a direct link to the Kia. Men who had worked and died in these woods. We had just unearthed a relic. What we had actually done was ring a dinner bell for a ghost. The woods are never truly silent at night. There's the call of an owl, the rustle of a mouse in the leaves. But these sounds were wrong. We were sitting by the fire when the first sound started. Thwack, thwack, a heavy, rhythmic chopping, coming from deep in the darkness beyond our firelight. The sound of an axe biting into wood. Then another sound joined it, the slow, grinding groan of a saw moving back and forth. Z, zov, z, zov. The sounds were impossible. We were miles from any road, any other campsite. There was no one else here. I grabbed a flashlight, my heart pounding, and swept the beam into the trees. Nothing, just an endless wall of black tree trunks. The sounds continued, methodical and tireless, the phantom sound of a full work crew just out of sight. The campfire suddenly felt very small, a tiny island of light in an ocean of unseen, impossible work. Ben, the history buff, was the first to put it together. The Whispering Pines logging camp, he whispered, his face pale in the firelight. The Great Fire of 1910. The ranger said they never found all the bodies. As he spoke, the air grew, ice cold, and then we saw them. At the very edge of the firelight, faint, shimmering figures began to appear. the translucent forms of men in old-fashioned work clothes covered in soot and ash. One was swinging a spectral axe into a tree that wasn't there. Two others were pulling a ghostly saw back and forth. They were the ghost crew. They moved with a grim, exhausted determination, forever repeating the last tasks of their lives. They didn't look at us. They didn't seem to know we were there. They were just working. A silent, sorrowful army of the dead, still toiling in their burnt-out forest. And then we saw their boss. A new light appeared in the woods, a cold, blue-white fire that seemed to suck the warmth from our own campfire. It was a lantern, held in the hand of a massive, broad-shouldered figure, Foreman Jedediah. He was more solid than the others, a dark, imposing silhouette. We couldn't see his face. It was lost in the deep shadow of his hat, but we could feel his presence. It was an aura of pure, tyrannical authority. He wasn't working. He was supervising. He stood motionless, watching his ghostly crew, the cold light of his lantern casting long, dancing shadows through the trees. And then he slowly turned his featureless head, and he looked directly at us. Unlike his crew, he knew we were there. We weren't just visitors anymore. We were trespassers. On his work site. The foreman took a slow step towards our campsite. We scrambled back, my hand knocking over a pot of water, which hissed on the fire. At the sound, the foreman stopped. His shadowy head tilted, and he looked past us at the rusted crosscut saw, propped against the log. The blue light from his lantern flared. A low, guttural groan echoed through the woods, a sound of pure, frustrated rage. The saw blade began to vibrate, a low hum that grew into a high-pitched whine. It lifted an inch off the log, hovering in the air before crashing back down. He wasn't interested in us. He was interested in his tool, the unfinished cut, the job he and his crew were trying to complete when the fire took them. He saw and he saw us, two able-bodied men sitting by a fire, doing nothing. He saw lazy workers on his site, and the foreman did not tolerate lazy workers. We had to get out. We abandoned everything, the tent, our gear, and just ran. We bolted through the pitch-black woods, our headlamps cutting frantic, bouncing paths through the trees. The sounds of the ghostly logging grew louder, surrounding. U.S., the whistle of a phantom steam engine, the crash of a tree that wasn't there. Then, a real crash. A huge dead pine tree, 100 feet from us, suddenly cracked and fell, its immense weight shaking the ground as it smashed across the path. Right in front of us, blocking our escape. It hadn't been windy. It wasn't rotten. It was pushed. It was a warning shot. He was hurting us. The foreman was driving us back towards the campsite, back towards the saw. We weren't being haunted anymore. We were being conscripted. We stumbled back to the campsite, defeated and trapped. The ghostly crew was still there, still working, their movements growing more frantic. The foreman stood in the center of the clearing, a silent, imposing statue of judgment. Ben, his voice, trembling, pointed at the rusted saw. "That's what he wants," he stammered. "It's not just a relic. It's a symbol. It's the job. The unfinished cut. He thinks we're part of his crew now. He won't let us leave until the work is done." He was right. The rage wasn't directed at us as people. It was directed at us as idle hands. To the foreman, a man on his site who isn't working is a problem that needs to be solved. We couldn't fight him. We couldn't run from him. We only had one choice. We had to give him his saw back. We had to help him finish the job. It was the scariest thing I've ever done. Together, Ben and I lifted the heavy, rusted saw blade. It was freezing cold, the metal seeming to leach the heat directly from our hands. We walked slowly, deliberately, back to the giant, lightning-scarred pine tree where we'd found it. The foreman and his crew watched our every move, their spectral forms pausing in their work. We reached the tree and gently, respectfully, leaned the saw blade against its trunk, placing it exactly where it had been. We were returning the tool. We were clocking out. We were telling him, with our actions, that the job was his, not ours. As the saw touched the bark, a deep, sighing groan echoed through the woods, not of anger, but of a strange, sorrowful release. The work could finally continue. The moment the saw was back in place, the cold vanished. The ghostly figures flickered and then faded away into the morning mist that was beginning to creep through the trees. The sounds of chopping and sawing ceased, replaced by the gentle, natural sounds of the forest waking up. We didn't wait. We grabbed our gear and walked, fast, for 6 hours until we hit the main trail. We never looked back. We told the ranger at the station that we'd gotten lost. We never mentioned the saw, the crew, or the foreman. Who would believe us? I still go camping, but I'm more careful now. I understand that the woods remember, and I know that some men are so defined by their work, so bound by their duty, that not even a forest fire, not even death itself, can make them lay down their tools.